Welcome to Your Health Reset, where we address the real root causes behind health issues today to get you rapid results on your health journey so you can be who you came here to be, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Sinclair Keneally, survivor of complex chronic illness, expert on resolving root causes, and co-founder of Detox Rejuvenation and Meditation RX. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I am your host, Sinclair Keneally, and today I am joined by the wonderful and esteemed Lebowitzes. Thank you so much for both being here today, and I love your contribution to the space. We use your products in so many aspects of our practice and our trainings. It's a real delight to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
So I know we wanted to dive into a topic that's very near and dear to my heart today, how to resolve chronic health issues. And I want to know, let's get us started by talking about how you got into this line of work. Why is this a topic of such passion for you?
I guess I started back as a hippie back in the 60s and 70s. And I started reading things on natural health, probably every natural health book that was written from the mid-1800s onward. I had a giant library of them. And I was delving into different ways to help people. I used to do some massage. I used to do some iridology, various things. And I started developing my own chronic health issues. Part of it started by moving into a moldy place in West Virginia that I was living and started having chronic fatigue, all kinds of other things. Before that, I took a Touch for Health class and was amazed by muscle testing. And I started studying it. It was something that in chiropractic school, I tended to specialize in. I read every paper that was ever written and so forth. And once I developed these chronic health problems, I just wasn't getting better. And I sought help pretty much all over the place. And I had to do my own research and figure out things. So we were delving into problems like molds and food sensitivities before they were popular and, how to find out what was relevant and how to resolve them. And it's just kind of gone on and on. I'm kind of a perfectionist. And if I don't get people better, I just keep digging and digging because I'm not satisfied if I can't figure everything out. It's kind of a real neat detective work that we do.
Aptly stated, for sure. And Noah, what made you want to follow in your dad's footsteps?
Honestly, I was always interested by it, but a lot of it, eventually I decided I wanted to go into the health realm, I will say. And, I thought about surgery or different things like that, but then I decided there's a lot of good people in emergency care, but there's not a lot of good people helping people get out of there in the first place, keep them away from emergency care. And that kind of is what drove me in wanting to help people that either help stop them before they got really bad or help those chronic people, people that have had health issues for 20, 30 years, people that have seen 70 plus doctors already and have a plethora of diagnosis and just kind of helping the people that haven't been helped so far. And that's what I enjoy. Kind of like my dad mentioned, just, we're always playing detective work on patients. And, you can have 5 people that come in with the same symptoms and every person needs a different regimen to get better. And that's kind of the fun aspect of it for us is, we don't just do the same, there's not one protocol. We don't do protocols because they don't usually work
necessarily optimally.
Yes, patient. We like to get people better as fast as we can. So we try to optimize each person and everyone gets their own specific plan.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about what do you see as necessary in that detective work, in that process to help people resolve chronic conditions?
Back in the 1980s, I was studying with clinical ecologists, and they were like the top kind of alternative MDs when it came to allergy and environmental insults and so forth. And they taught a concept called total load. Total load is basically everything affecting your body. It could be microbes, it could be foods, it could be chemicals, it could be metals, it could be emotional stuff, it could be hormonal stuff. And when all of the different things that are affecting you, you become symptomatic. As opposed to, say, some doctors that blame everything on parasites or everything on mold or whatever it happens to be, we look at all of the different things that could be affecting the people, and we try to impact as many of them as we can to get people as far below their threshold as we can so that things that previously affected them don't anymore.
Most folks listening are either, just starting out on their health journey, taking control back because they have not found simple answers to their issues, whether they're working with a diagnosis or they defy diagnosis. And then you have those advanced students in the audience who often know more than their practitioners about what's going on with them. And they're looking just for that next nugget that they may not have heard of. So would love to skew the conversation to support both of those populations today, as well as, of course, the practitioners who are listening. Hi, guys, who are tired of crashing their patients, and they're really on the hunt for those tools that will help support them and make it easier on their patients.
I mean, one thing that we've definitely found is, like you mentioned, you don't want to just focus on one thing at a time, because a lot of the times it's cumulative. And if you just focus on trying to treat infections, but you ignore food sensitivities, then every time you eat those certain foods, your body's creating inflammation. Your body has to work on quenching the inflammation, and it can actually focus on fighting the infections.
If your big thing is let's kill funguses in people's bodies, but you don't look at bacteria, for instance, you might kill off all the funguses, and suddenly the bacteria that shouldn't be there are just going to thrive because you've cut off competition. So, you really have to look at everything at the same time to really get the best results.
So it's not uncommon, most people that come in, we find a mixture of different types of infections that they have. I mean, there could be one that's causing more symptomatology than others, but it's rare you ever see someone with just parasites or just fungus, or, it's usually like they might have a little bit of bacteria, a little bit of fungal, a little bit of viral issues going on at the same time of multiple different things. And you want to address all of them at once. And then, like I said, you also, if there are food sensitivities, you need to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the food sensitivities are secondary to the microbes, but unless you find them, like Noah said, and take people off of it temporarily, you're still going to feed inflammation and other things. I mean, if we had to limit our practice to 3 things, which we don't and we won't, probably dealing with microbes, dealing with foods, and taking people off of wrong supplementation brings the best, quickest results. I mean, some people obviously are metal toxic or chemically overloaded or have hypercoagulation issues or hormone imbalances, but those first 3 tend to yield the most symptomatic change the quickest.
And it's not uncommon for us to work on many aspects at the same time. So we're going to be working on multiple types of microbes at the same time. We're going to be removing food sensitivities. And then if there are chemicals or metals, and with microbes, that's one reason we use a lot of herbs in our practice, because, unlike certain supplements out there that are very specific, it's not a prescription for an antifungal or an antiviral or antiparasitic. Herbs are very broad spectrum. Like if you ask my dad his favorite supplement for mold or for parasites or for bacteria, he'd give you the same answer for all of those, which is Malia, which is neem leaf. So it's nice because they're so broad spectrum, you can cover many aspects using just a couple different herbs because of how they work in nature, and it's pretty amazing.
And it's always important to look for the underlying source. Like say someone has a fungal issue, and I tend to use the words fungal and mold synonymously, but if you don't check their environment, and there's mold in their house somewhere, or there's mold in their partner, and so they're having, exchange of body fluids, or their pet licks them all the time, and their pet has an issue. If you don't check for those things, they're either not going to resolve or they're going to keep coming back. So trying to figure out, where's this exposure coming from? Or if we find copper in the purse, do they have copper water pipes? Are they using certain cosmetics that are copper based, even though they're called natural mineral based? It's like looking for those underlying things that might be feeding recidivism so that you're not getting the person better.
Oh, so I actually would love for you to expand on that for a moment. What do you see as the most overlooked root causes? Perhaps they're not the primary thing, but they are contributing root causes to people's chronic conditions that are missed by other practitioners.
It depends on the practitioner because, a lot of practitioners tend to specialize. I mean, because we check for all the different microbes, viruses, spirochetes, a lot of doctors don't do all that. And if you don't have a type of diagnostic method that looks for all of those things, you're looking for 3 species of Borrelia, but there are a lot more that can cause problems. Or, if you're looking at, a couple of different molds, but again, there are hundreds of them that can cause issues, because the question isn't only presence, like 2 people can have the same fungi living in their body. And in one person, they're disabled, the other person's fine, so when you're looking at things like labs, which are valuable, but they're telling you presence, they're not telling you what the person's reacting to. Or even metals, if I had mercury, just the teeniest microgram of it in my body, I'm going to be very symptomatic. My wife could drink a cup of it and be fine. So again, finding out not only what's present, but what the person is actually reacting to is really critical. And if you're totally relying on labs and not some type of neurologic feedback technique, you could miss some things that are really critical, because it might be not significant enough to show on a lab, but still be very significant for that person.
It's a really important insight. Yeah, I agree. Noah, were you going to share something?
You're fine. I mean, one thing I was just going to throw in earlier in terms of microbes and getting to the root cause, one, I'd say, big topic over the past 5 years has been mycotoxins. But a lot of people don't look at the root cause. I mean, you can breathe it in from buildings and things like that, but if you have a living fungal issue inside you, that's just going to keep producing mycotoxins. So just chelating out mycotoxins while not addressing an active fungus living inside you, you're really not getting to the root cause or getting anywhere. You may or may not have symptomatic improvement. But most times with mycotoxins, we find them secondary to active fungal issues. And if you deal with active fungal issues, then generally your body will dump the mycotoxins on their own, or you might be able to do a little bit of chelating and pulling out afterwards. But that's just, again, kind of a root cause that I feel like a lot of people have been missing lately.
Because what's interesting is, things like fungal issues they've been dealing with for millennia. You could read in the book Leviticus about them treating fungal issues. When it comes to things like Lyme, they've actually found Borrelia in mummies. So it's been around, but people were able to keep it pretty much dormant and asymptomatic because, we weren't exposed to electromagnetic fields. We weren't exposed to GMOs. We weren't exposed to artificial carpets and all these other things that we're exposed to all the time, that our body is fighting so many things just to keep level that it doesn't have the ability to keep dormant all of the things that it used to be able to. That, for instance, with people getting a lot of injections recently for various things, it's, the body's had to fight all of those different components of it. And as a result, a lot of the dormant infections have emerged because their body just can't do so many things at once.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Goes back to that total load, right?
And I think one thing a lot of people miss in regards to foods are, there's not one diet that's perfect for everyone. In the past year, we've probably put some people vegan and we've put some people carnivore and everything in between. Some people do fine on gluten, some people don't. Nightshades are one of the biggest nightshades and caffeine, I would say.
Nightshades are missed. When talks about things that are missed, a lot of doctors don't focus on nightshades or oxalates.
And with nightshades specifically, I'd say almost all autoimmune cases, not all, but most autoimmune cases, people have nightshade issues. I don't know how many cases of diarrhea I've fixed by getting people off nightshades and or caffeine, I should say. And, there really isn't any lab testing for nightshades. And it can take a while to clear out your body just because the half-life can be over a month. So it's one of those things, it's not like within 24, 48 hours, all your symptoms improve because it can take a lot of time to get out of your system.
People say with nightshade issues, you have to know you don't give them ashwagandha because that's a nightshade.
Or goji berries.
Thank you. I hate being the bearer of that bad news. Somebody comes in with an autoimmune condition and they're taking lots of ashwagandha. Okay, we're going to step away from the...
It's the same type of thing. My dad loves taking people off caffeine. But, people's like, oh, it's marketed kind of as a health food now. It has some antioxidants and things like that. And some people do fine with it, but I don't know how many cases of insomnia, how many cases of anxiety, how many inflammatory rheumatoid arthritis cases.
Musculoskeletal issues that don't resolve.
Musculoskeletal issues don't resolve. All of those, that taking off people off coffee, off chocolate, off acai, off guarana, yerba mate. And some people, some people just, their livers are overloaded. It's not properly breaking down caffeine. Other people, they just don't do well with it because it's causing overstimulation. But in a lot of people, we see that really screw up. And that's something that a lot of people are embracing more and more, unfortunately.
And also, when I mentioned bad supplements, there's a couple of things. You have the people who just go online and take 40 or 50 things that they read are going to be good for their condition. You have other people diagnosed academically, but there are things to realize about supplements. I worked in the supplement industry for, close to 25 years, and things have changed a lot. Most raw materials are sourced from factories in China at this point. And they've made a big switch. A lot of vitamins and minerals these days are actually byproducts of genetically modified bacteria and fungi that they've made to be able to make these, different vitamins and so forth. So you're basically, eating byproducts of GMO microbes, when you take your B vitamin or your, different things like that. And your body, might react to that because it's not natural. And there's a lot of deception in the industry, that they hide, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I really wanted to give you a chance to talk about the shortcuts that other supplement companies take today and to help educate the consumer and the practitioner, because we'll get people in our practice. And, like Michael is a huge proponent of getting people off of everything they come in the door with because it's all synthetic and it's all like plugging holes because of a lab value or, something somebody saw a presentation about in the marketing is slick, but the production choices are very unfortunate, shall we say. What should people look out for?
One of the biggest things you always have to look at in supplements is the other ingredient. If you look, ideally something should be what the active ingredient and nothing else. In herbs, you can do that, or magnesium or some things like that, you could. But other things like, let's take B vitamins and things like the amount of actual B12 is so minuscule. Most of the capsule is other ingredients.
Because you have like 1 microgram of B12 in a 200 milligram capsule.
And I mean, some of it definitely is the fillers that they add. Like, let's take magnesium stearate or vegetable stearate or calcium stearate. One of the most commonly used things. It's in almost every supplement out there. And it's a fat, basically, so it coats your vitamins, so you're not going to absorb it very well. The reason that they generally use it is, so let's take a supplement that let's say you're running 20,000 bottles, and it might take a month to run on a semiotic machine by hand. If you added magnesium stearate, instead of a month of runtime, you could run it in 1 day. That's humongous cost savings, which is why they add it in there. And then also, if you actually want to do the research, magnesium stearate is oftentimes made from GMO cottonseed oil, but that doesn't have to be listed on the ingredient. So that's one big thing. I mean, you have a lot of silicon dioxide, which seems pretty benign, but we've seen people become sensitive to silicon or silica after taking a lot of supplements. Some companies will use leucine, which isn't that bad, but if you're taking, let's say, 5 or 10 different supplements from a company that's adding leucine in, and leucine is the majority of the pill, you could be overdosing on leucine, and that can throw off all of your other amino acid balances in the body. I mean, usually more the junkier supplements, you have things like titanium dioxide, and that can lead to celiac type inflammation in the gut and other things along those lines. I mean, those are some of the biggest ones, I would say. I mean, then you have a lot of even worse things that they add into supplements.
When it comes to herbs, if you're looking at tinctures, if it just says ethanol or alcohol, it doesn't say, for instance, organically, derived, it could be coming from GMO corn alcohol.
Yeah.
A lot of glandulars that people use, there are some companies that do glandular supplements from grass-fed animals, but if it doesn't list it, it's going to be conventional animals. No matter how good of a brand it is, if it doesn't say it's grass-fed, it's not going to be. So it's like, why would you want to use a liver supplement from a conventionally fed liver that's pumped full of antibiotics and hormones?
Perfectly said.
Even if it's an herb, if they've modified it to have a certain percentage of an active ingredient, what did they use to modify it? Did they use some type of petrochemical, which a lot of times that, they will use, how did they do that? Because it didn't occur that way in nature. I look at most vitamins and minerals as being pharmaceuticals, and they do have their place, ideally for as short a time as possible, because you're going to get people on a nutrient-dense diet. You're going to take a lot of their exposures out of their life so that they can, maintain without relying on those type of things. When it comes to whole herbs, that's a little bit different because it is more of a whole natural product if it's just dry. And, that's what we tend to use for killing off various microbes, for normalizing neurotransmitters, hormones, and so forth, just because they have a track record for almost as long as human beings have been around. And, the downside is pretty small compared to other things.
And with any supplement, I always look at, even for good quality supplements, I mean, anything that's strong enough to help you if you need it is strong enough to hurt you if you don't need it. And it's amazing how many people, like the top 3 things that I mentioned are getting people off wrong supplementation. If you're taking even a great quality supplement, that could be an herb, that could be a vitamin, a mineral, and your body doesn't need it because it's out of balance right now, that's what's going to screw you up. And we see that more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, like I mentioned, that it's so hard to help people who have been scared into creating the Excel spreadsheet where they're on 40 supplements, right? And they've seen so many practitioners and bounced from person to person that they've created this where they're basically living on pills and they're down to 3 food ingredients in real life, real foods. And they're on all these things. It's very difficult to help them when they're too scared to get off of them.
Yeah, because like you just said, I mean, a lot of them are on them for indefinite periods. If you put people on things, ideally, unless there's some real genetic glitch there, they should be relatively short term. If they need an antifungal for a year, why is that? That shouldn't happen. It should be
right.
If they need B6 forever, I used to take zinc all the time, and I always needed zinc. And when I went off of a couple of foods that I was reacting to, I didn't need zinc anymore. You take someone who's a big grain eater, phytic acid be a big issue in some people. It can deplete them of zinc and magnesium and iron and some other things. A lot of times the anti-nutrients in their life end up making them have a lifetime need for some synthetic nutrient. You just have to figure that out.
And so kind of getting to the root cause. So like I had a patient that kept showing up using my testing for zinc. And they were feeling better on it. But again, that's not getting to the root cause. So if I see someone keep eating zinc, I'm thinking, okay, they're probably eating some food that they're having a sensitivity to. Their body's producing histamine, then they're depleted on zinc to help break down the histamine. So then I tested about 200 different foods on this patient, and I took her off of cucumbers, celery, and lettuce, and then all of her headaches went away. And then again, those are foods that I would typically say are great. But for this specific person, I use the zinc as saying, okay, if they need zinc, they're doing better on zinc. We're missing the root cause. Let's find the root cause. And then their headaches completely went away and they stopped needing zinc because they weren't creating that inflammatory reaction.
Often, we have sent in stool samples from the same sample of stool, to the same company and gotten different results, or to different companies and got different results, to make sure if you're using the lab that it's reproducible. And the microbiome can change so quickly just with the change of diet, that if you're changing the person's diet, oftentimes, by the time your lab comes back, you're treating a condition that's not there anymore.
Interesting. So let's do a little recap here of what we've covered so far. We've talked about foods that are inflammatory and making sure that you're really considering holistically, like what is in the diet. You mentioned oxalates very briefly. Could you expand on your thoughts on that? Because no one else has done that in this summit yet.
I mean, oxalates, in some people, they can be a big deal. I will say in a lot of people, I find them secondary. Oxalates, the 2 main sources you can have are going to be eating foods that are very high in it. So let's take, for all the people that are going gluten-free, they're doing crazy amounts of almonds nowadays. Almonds, you're going to be getting a lot of oxalates in. Or we've had athletes that start doing tons of spinach in their smoothies and things like that, and then they'll start to get issues from it. And then, but also if you have a fungal issue inside, then that's actually going to be producing oxalates. So a lot of the time, again, going back to kind of the roots, finding any type of infections, any type of fungal issue, if you can treat that, then your body's going to stop producing oxalates and it can do a lot better.
So there have been some people, we had an NFL player who never got injured in his whole career until his teammate convinced him to start doing smoothies with spinach. And suddenly he was getting injured all the time. He has lots of musculoskeletal pain. People that have, unresolved musculoskeletal pains, people who have tendencies to kidney stones, things like that, you would think oxalates perhaps, because they definitely can be implicated. And because, again, they are big, because a lot of people are doing a lot of spinach, chard, almonds, all those type of things.
Power green mix in all their smoothies. So
Yeah. Enough with the smoothies. Step away from the histamine oxalate bombs. If you have microbial issues and digestive issues, let's slow down, focus on absorption. Thanks for saying that. So we talked about food sensitivities and inflammatory foods. We talked about expanding testing beyond labs, right? And, what can get overlooked if you don't. What else do folks need to be looking at? We talked about the quality of supplementation, getting off of unnecessary things, even if they're great, may not need to be on them for the long term. What other parts of your process do you want to make sure people know?
we could speak forever about metals, and we definitely check them on every patient. One thing we focus on that a lot of people don't is hypercoagulation as a result of either microbes or metals or chemicals and so forth. And if your blood gets too thick, even if you're taking the right stuff, it might not get absorbed. It'd be hard to get it through all the little capillaries and so forth. Anybody with a family history of strokes or miscarriages might genetically have a hypercoagulation issue. Beside all the people, even now with, different viruses that have been going around, and people have been ending up with, microclots or regular clots and so forth. And I almost died in 2 different occasions about 15 years ago from unknown viruses that caused me to have blood clots that traveled to my lungs. And, because after that, we did all the testing and everything. There was no genetic predisposition or anything in my diet that would have caused it. It was just a result of having these viruses that I wasn't aware of. And I actually caused a relapse of them by taking certain supplementation that I shouldn't have, that broke down some biofilms and let the virus loose again and just about killed me. I think hypercoagulation, even though it's not a big issue in a lot of people, it can be a life-saving issue in some people. So to have an awareness of that, I think, can be really important. Things like hormones can be important, but so many times when we treat these things that we've mentioned, the hormones tend to just come back to normal on their own. The body had to make more cortisol because it was stressed out dealing with, fighting this or doing this or, different things. We've seen CRPs normalize very quickly, without treating them. Again, you're just treating these underlying things, and then the body just develops a homeostasis and just everything kind of optimizes.
And I think just throw in, I think one thing a lot of people can get, labs can be very useful. We won't deny that. A lot of people get in the pitfall of chasing labs. And don't want to treat necessarily, it can guide you sometimes, but you don't want to just treat lab values. You won't get great results doing that.
And you have to understand them. Let's say you ran a hair test, and let's say your lead was high in your hair. The question, is that good or bad? And the answer is, we don't know. It might be high in your hair because your body's great at excreting all the lead that comes in. So it's in your hair, but there's hardly any in your body at the moment. So it could be a good sign. It could be a bad sign. That means your body is so toxic with lead that it's showing up in your hair, but it's also in your body. So trying to understand what a lab test means is really important. And a lot of people have no clue how to do that.
Yeah, and its limitations. It's simply a window. We won't use hair mineral analysis because we feel that it only shows what the body is in a position to excrete through that channel. It's not looking at total body load.
And again, if something else is low or high, why is that? Could be due to something totally different, so you don't necessarily treat that. Try to, again, find underlying causes.
Okay, so this brings me to wanting to discuss industrial toxins with you guys and your approach to that, within your product line, within your practice. What are your thoughts on that?
We tend to live in areas that don't have major issues. Like now we're living in rural Maui. But we do definitely get patients who, either have a history of living in those areas, or they come from, they fly in from other places that have those issues. We definitely see that. You especially see it in people who don't sweat very well, to just keep all the toxins inside. And then again, if you have microbes on top of it, because if you have a fungus that's producing benzene and aldehydes in your body, and plus you've had all the benzene and aldehydes in your environment and so forth, it tends to really overload. In really tough patients, occasionally we've added, sauna therapy, but usually we'll use different things to chelate out. Our favorite product for a lot of reasons is takasumi, which is a carbonized bamboo that my other son discovered when he lived in Japan, that they use for all kinds of things in Asia, from cancer patients to all kinds of other things. And it seems to be a non-specific chelator of negative substances. So we use it for metals, we use it for chemicals. For me, it helped me with the mercury issue that I probably have broken the world's record for most SA taken in a lifetime, and it only took me so far. But then the takasumi took me to a whole different level. Occasionally we use things like selenium or molybdenum short term, but things like takasumi, increasing liver function with herbs like schizandra, or Chocopiedra or different things like that.
Oh,
Making
really?
sure their lymph is working well. We'll use Manchista will make sure they're hydrated, different things like that.
Too, definitely, if we can optimize, if we can treat a lot of the microbes, then their lymphatic system is going to be working better, and then it can start getting out toxins that way. So a lot of the times, while we give sometimes Takasumi or Manchista for cleaning the lymph, if we can get the person a lot healthier so their lymph system isn't overloaded, then it can, and their liver isn't overloaded, then it can naturally excrete a lot of these chemicals. One thing to throw in with Takasumi, which my dad mentioned, a really cool thing about it, unlike charcoal, we've had a lot of people that have run red blood cell analysis on minerals, and they've had clients take it for 6 months or a year, and it's never depleted any of the good stuff, which unlike charcoal, which can deplete a lot of things, we've had a lot of people be amazed, and it's like, wow, our clients took it and it didn't actually deplete anything. It, for whatever reason, it really does seem just to take out the bad stuff and leave the good alone.
That's such an important distinction. You got to be really careful when you're choosing binders for that reason. You don't want to be depleting. We're already under mineralized, most of us, due to our food production.
One thing when it comes to supplements, because one of my jobs is product control with our herb company. And you can have supplements that come in with the same certificates of analysis. They don't have, this many microbes, and they look really good, but they might be totally different, even though they're the same product. Because they don't check for everything. So we do all types of in-house testing, more on an energetic level, to make sure that the products are going to perform. Because, people might take ashwagandha or they might take something else that never works for them. And it might mean that they just don't need that herb, but it might mean that particular one, where it was grown, the weather conditions, of this and that. You have to have some way to figure out the efficacy of your raw materials.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you said that. One of the things that I was excited to talk to you about today is that we often direct people to your products when they're hypersensitive and they do not heal well. And they always report back, oh, I could feel my body really liked that. Oh, I could feel my body really tolerate that. Oh, the Supreme Nutrition products, those are the bottles that I like. Those are the ones I actually take every day. And it's, to me, that is speaks very highly of your sourcing and the production methods that you choose.
Well, I think it's the benefit of having a very hypersensitive quality control person. So it's not necessarily good for them. It helps them really in their selection.
My dad will get different companies' capsules and say, energetically, he likes these two, how they test this one, he doesn't. So we don't use that capsule.
Some of the organic veggie caps are fungal derivatives, and they might not do well with people with fungal issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And your sensitive people, even the smallest detail makes all the difference in the world. You have your general population and they could probably take your spectrum or whatever and do okay. But, in your sensitive people that are sick, every little bit matters.
More and more people are flipping into the sensitive people.
It's shifting very fast, unfortunately.
It'll load, right? One of my favorite ways to use your products is the Malia Morinda Vedanga progression. Mm-hmm. And I would love for you to discuss that a little bit, because this is still very mysterious for a lot of people.
Morinda started, that was our first product. And we were visiting Kauai as a family. And a friend of mine needed some help in his taro field. And so the rest of the family dropped me off there and they all went to go to a zip line. And I got there and my friend said, I'm really glad you're here. We need your help, but you're going to probably get leptospirosis, because everybody that works in this field gets leptospirosis. And I had been playing around with some Morinda, which is Noni, but it depends on when you harvest it. I went to a health food store and I was eating some Noni fruit leather, which is harvested pretty early. And so I worked there all day. He ended up with leptospirosis and I ended up not getting it. I was thinking maybe it's this fruit leather I was doing. And so we started importing some Noni or Morinda from lots of different countries and putting it through all kinds of tests. And we found some that we liked. And we were giving it to some people. And, one of my patients said, hey, I go to the Caribbean every year. I always come back with a fungus infection. So we gave them some. They went to the Caribbean. They came back clean. We started doing tests like that. And, that became a product that we put out. Because, again, it's very broad spectrum.
Morinda and Malia are two very broad spectrum supplements. Again, they work very well for bacteria, for viral, for fungal, parasitic.
And it'll be different than drinking Noni juice, which is fermented. Or, because that has totally different properties. Be aware of your source. Like the Big Island of Hawaii is a wonderful place, but Kilauea volcano erupts a lot. So if the Noni is grown somewhere in the windfall of Kilauea, it might have high mercury levels. There are different things to know, when you're evaluating different sources of things, and when was it harvested, and so forth. Because Noni, again, once it starts fermenting, which a lot of people like, the properties totally change.
And Malia, again, one of our very favorite broad spectrum. I mean, that in our mind is probably the strongest safe herb there is. It's our strongest herb that we use in practice for all different types of things, and we have great results with it. Vidanga is a newer herb that we've used. It's one of my favorites. I mean, it's great for helminths, so kind of your longer parasites, but I often use it for fungal issues, and people do really well with it for that. It's also cool because it helps support methylation. It actually lowered my homocysteine levels about 20% taking it for a month. And there's studies out of India showing how it helps a lot with methylation support, specifically targeting the folic acid pathway. So it's one of those cool things, of how herbs can have multiple different benefits in people.
Very cool. So those are 3 of my favorite products of yours. What are some of your favorites, aside from Takasumi?
If I talk antimicrobials, I have to throw in golden thread also. I mean, the 3 you mentioned along with golden thread, which is Chinese coptis, it's very high in berberine. Again, broad spectrum antimicrobial, probably the best thing out there for H. pylori, but also for a lot of different things. If I ever get a sore throat, I just like to mix it in water and gargle it. Worst tasting stuff in the world, but it works wonders doing that. Another one that we use a lot of is Dan Shen. Dan Shen in Chinese medicine is the top cardiac herb. And it's cool because it does multiple things. It's fibrinolytic, so it helps to break down blood clots. It's a platelet aggregate inhibitor, so it helps to stop blood clots from the first place. And it also increases nitric oxide in the heart, so it increases blood vessel diameter. So it's really good for that. For the people that have hypercoagulation issues, like my dad mentioned, it can be good to help dilate those blood vessels, to thin out the blood, to help get the nutrients and the herbs and whatnot to those smaller capillary beds. And then also lately with viruses and other things causing a lot of blood clots lately, it can be very beneficial for that as a preventative.
Super helpful for people to know. Thank you for sharing that.
I like Scutellaria a lot because it's a great broad spectrum antimicrobial. It's Scutellaria bicalensis, so it's Chinese skullcap, especially fungus. It also inhibits Th17, so it helps with different autoimmune issues.
I mean, I could go on and talk about herbs on it nonstop. And one other,
we made a greens product, and what made it unique wasn't what's in it so much as what's not in it. Because a lot of greens products put in alfalfa, and I remember when the Gerson Institute found that when they were using alfalfa juice in people, a lot of them developed autoimmune conditions. We don't have alfalfa. We don't have different algae in there because they have excitotoxins in them, and it's very hard to find non-contaminated ones. We don't put different grasses in them that their end products end up with gluten. We don't put barley grass or wheatgrass or any of those things because a lot of people will develop sensitivities to those. Even though they might be gluten-free at that stage, their body kind of remembers that that's a gluten-containing plant, and it tends to react as a result. We put in various greens that didn't have those negative issues in it for people who want greens.
Yeah, remind me, there's dandelion, nettle, I think. What else is in there?
Siberian miner's lettuce, chickweed, couchgrass.
Nice. Yeah, people love that stuff. So I really wanted to pick your brain about at the product level just for fun, and also because I know that's really exciting for people to see if they haven't been exposed to your product line, just a few ways to consider, where to start and what to research. So I do want to zoom back out and give you a chance to share any last thoughts on this topic of resolving chronic illness. We've covered a lot of territory today. Is there anything that you want to make sure gets put in?
I mean, for the practitioners, we definitely teach more in-depth courses than what we went over. And I put out a free newsletter that goes out monthly to people. It's been going out for 30 years, probably. Just little tidbits about different things.
I mean, for people that are trying to correct their health and get to the root cause, the couple of things I like to mention are, don't give up hope, because I don't know how many people we've had come see us with, again, 30, 40, 50 doctor visits before, and they haven't gotten better. Sometimes you also have to get rid of your preconceived ideas of, like we talked about earlier, maybe you shouldn't be taking 40 supplements a day. Maybe a simple approach is actually a better approach in a lot of people. And sometimes it's not just, again, you do this or you do this or you do this. Sometimes you have to do all of those together at the same time in terms of diet, in terms of treating infections, in terms of detoxing.
And also, even though a lot of people, as you said, know more than their practitioners, which I totally agree with, when you start doing internet searches for your condition, you might get hooked on, this is the one cause that's causing all my issues, and they come and just fixated on that. That's either not part of it or just a small part of it. And they have to kind of be open to something, broader than that. Not going to be one magic bullet.
Right. Yeah, we have to get away from the magic bullet concept and the concept that health is linear and more is not necessarily faster. These are really important clinical gems. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your contribution to the field and for your commitment to quality and excellence. We've been in manufacturing. We know that there's a lot of decisions that happen behind closed doors where no one is watching. And the way that people respond to your products lets us know everything we need to know about the decisions that you're making. So we appreciate you.
Thank you for having
us. We're happy to answer questions and so forth. We're pretty available. It kind of depends.
Thanks for listening. Go to detoxrejuvenation.com to find the links in the show notes to everything we covered in this episode. Please subscribe, review, and share with other humans who need this precious information. Let's help each other. Until next time, love, Sinclair.